All right, thanks everyone. I'm really excited to be here. So my name is Moshe, like Cameron said, one of the founders of Applitools. That's my Twitter handle, but I'm also available on email, LinkedIn, anything. We're going to speak today about the 6 pillars of successful test automation. And I was actually planning to do a lot of prep for that talk, prepare the slides, do some rehearsals over my flight. I came from San Francisco, so it was like a 15-hour flight, and I had all the evenings during this week where I was planning to actually prepare and rehearse. But then the terror attack on Israel happened over the weekend, and I was kind of like plugged into the news all the last few days and trying to help some friends that were affected and had some family members that were murdered. So again, I'll try to still make it a great talk, but I didn't have as much prep as I wanted, but we'll try to keep it very valuable for you guys as well. And what we're going to cover today, so when we speak about the 6 pillars of successful test automation, I don't think that there is one correct answer, these 6 pillars are true for any company, because, different companies work in different industries, they test different applications, they have different requirements, different dependencies. So it's really hard to say what are the 6 things that are true for everyone. But I still try to keep it very generic and get things that I think anyone can implement and can get value from. And in order to validate some of my thoughts around it, again, I'm one person, I have my thoughts about these 6 pillars, but I also wanted to interview people from the industry. So I spoke with people from Netflix and Hilton and Johnson & Johnson. You'll see some other folks which I respect and I think are thought leaders in that space. And I asked them for their 6 pillars. And at the end of the presentation, after presenting my thoughts, I also share some insights from some other community members which may know better than me. So we'll try to cover that. I also had a lot of jokes kind of like for each and every pillar, but I'm not really in the mood for that, so we'll skip this part. But let's get going. So first of all, just to get started, before we dive into the pillars, let's just get an alignment on why is successful test automation so important. And again, I know a lot of you here are doing test automation, so I probably don't need to explain that to you. But just to have initial alignment. So when you look at today's environment with the volume of applications that are being developed, the amount of devices and browsers that you need to test on, the complexity of these applications, with the latest and greatest UI frameworks, the user experiences that companies are creating are much more complex and dynamic than ever before. And add to that the velocity. So everyone are now trying to do continuous delivery and release multiple times per day, or at least multiple times per week. And when you add all of these things together, it gets to like a really, really complex scenario, and you can't really get away with just testing it manually. You have to have a really strong and solid automation that runs all the time. And in the last year, everyone are trying to cut costs. The economic environment around us, unfortunately, is changing, and companies have less budgets and are trying to do more with less. So it's becoming even harder to deal with all this complexity when you have less resources. Now, let's see what happens when you have unsuccessful test automation or when you're not successful with these efforts. So I brought here some industry data on what's happening at companies that are not successful. And these surveys from Stripe and GitLab and Cisco, I think are probably the largest surveys when it comes to engineering productivity and testing productivity. So the Stripe survey from last year found that like 42% productivity loss is caused by inefficient testing or a lack of automation. This survey from GitLab actually found that testing was the #1 reason for bottlenecks in releases and velocity loss. And this is, I think, one of the largest surveys. More than like 4,000 people responded to this one. And the survey from Cisco, again, I think this is probably a data point that you're all familiar with, but when you find defects in production, it costs 5x more to fix it compared to if you find it early in the cycle. So that's a reason why it's really, really important to have a quick feedback loop and be able to get the results fast. All right, so I think we're in alignment on why test automation is important, and I think we probably shouldn't have spent much time on that, but let's dive into the 6 pillars. And again, when I told about this to someone that I'm giving this talk, he asked me why 6 pillars? And I told him, actually, I don't know. I had to submit a talk to Cameron 6 months ago, and I didn't really know. I just said, let's say 6 pillars for successful automation. We'll figure out what are these 6 pillars. But actually, But actually, it worked out pretty well. So, let's get into that and see. And the order that I'm presenting these pillars is not any order of priority or importance. It's just all of them are actually important, and we'll cover each and every one separately. So pillar number one is robust test framework. And what I mean when I say robust test framework, so basically, again, this is, I think, like probably everyone agree about that, but you need to have ability to author tests quickly and in a simple way. Make sure that this framework is aligned with the skill that you have in the team. You need to make sure it's maintainable, so it's really easy to maintain the framework, maintain the test, and make sure that it's reusable. And let's dive into each of these points to understand a little bit more what it means. So when we speak about matching the team skills, this part is actually important. And here, honestly, there is a lot of talks about, what's better, Playwright or Cypress or Selenium. And we're probably also guilty on that because we do a lot of webinars of, like Playwright versus Cypress, Cypress versus Selenium. And it's, it's fun to geek out about these topics. But from my perspective, this is like a secondary priority. I mean, it's not really what's important. What's important is what aligns with your team skills and what everyone in the team feels comfortable with. And not just, the test engineers, but also the developers, product managers. You need to have a framework that get a buy-in from everyone in the organization. And they treat it like the application code. The framework code needs to be treated the same way like the application code. And anyone in the team needs to be able to update tests, review test results, execute tests. So you can't really depend on one automation architect that will be the only person that can go in and update tests. If that's the situation, you're screwed. And the other thing, by the way, people also ask me about codeless tests. So I think codeless tests are also legit. I mean, it doesn't matter if you use code-based or if you use codeless, as long as it's aligned with the team skills and that people buy into it and adapt it. That's what's most important. The second point is about maintainability. So when talking about maintainability, basically this means you have to first try to get tests that are easy to maintain. Like I mentioned, that anyone in the team can help maintain tests and also maintain the framework if any upgrades are needed for the environments or for the framework. You need to try to write less code, which helps you create faster tests. So there are more techniques like visual AI. Again, I probably won't have much time to spend on this, but if you're interested, you can stop by later and we can chat about it. But visual AI can help you reduce the assertions and get one assertion that covers an entire page. So this means less code. This means less maintenance. There are some techniques like self-healing tests, which again, self-healing used to be kind of like associated with proprietary tools. So if you wanted to use self-healing, you had to use some of the proprietary testing tools. But recently, there are more and more solutions which allow you to use self-healing as part of your Selenium or Cypress or Playwright test, just as part of your execution grid, so you can get that. And of course, the coding standards and documentation of the test. This is also a really important point to make sure that if a test breaks, someone can come in and immediately understand what's wrong and fix it. And I think reusable, this is pretty self-explanatory, but it needs to be really easy to write once and reuse it across tests. So if you have common methods like login and other things, make sure you can write it once and reuse it. And this also adds like a single point of failure. So if the login flow changes, you only need to update it in one place. You don't need to repeat it in multiple places. And it makes it easy to write new tests. All right, I think we're done with the first pillar. Let's jump into the second one. And this second pillar actually had a complete agreement with everyone that I spoke with. All the people I spoke with and interviewed, all of them had this one as part of the pillars. It's scalable test infrastructure. And what does it mean to have scalable test infrastructure? So first of all, the speed and parallel execution. So we spoke about discovering bugs late. The speed aspect is really important. Like, in the past, companies were running, the weekend cycle or the night cycle and coming back in the morning and reviewing the results. You can't really afford to do it anymore. I mean, you have to be able to run tests and get the results in seconds or in minutes, definitely not in hours and definitely not in days. And this is a critical point. I probably can't stress it enough. You need to be able to execute it on the browsers and devices that your customers are using or care about. And it needs to be stable. I mean, the results need to be stable, consistent, reliable. Again, when we speak about speed, I think another point that it's important is not just that the CI environment will be able to run tests quickly at high concurrency and get the results back quickly, but also that any developer or anyone that made changes to the code and would like to run tests locally, they should have access to run tests quickly, run tests at scale. So that's an important point. The next point is about executing across different browsers and devices. So I think here it's really important to be able to execute or simulate across the browser environment that the users care about. And the point that I mentioned here is traditionally the way companies used to do it, I think still most companies do it today. If you have a test and you would like to run it on Chrome and Firefox and Safari and iPhone Safari and Android Chrome, you basically have to take the same test and run it 5 times, which is very inefficient when you think about it. I mean, you take the test, you run it the same test, you run 5 times. It adds flakiness, it adds time, it adds cost. And there are modern ways to do it, which again, we're doing it. I think other vendors also support it. But basically, the ability to leverage newer technology to run the test once and simulate the results from all the different environments. So you don't actually need to go and run the test 5 times. Just execute the test once on one environment and get the results back, get the screens back from all the different browsers and devices. It just helps you do it much faster with much less maintenance. And again, about stability, so I think the point here that's important is that tests have to be deterministic. So your environment that you load has to be the same environment every time. You can't have any surprises or any magic that's happening in your environment or in your infrastructure. It has to be very consistent. And if a test fails, you really need to know why it failed. I mean, is it an environment issue? Is it a defect? This needs to be clear and doesn't require like a long investigation process. And we spoke about self-healing. I wanted to show you a quick example of how you can actually do it in Selenium. Let's see if the video will be on my side here. 1 second. So yeah, that's that. So it's not moving to this screen. Let's see. Can I switch screens here, or I can't switch screens? Maybe we'll keep the videos to the end. I'll show all the videos at the end. So let's continue. Okay, so okay, next pillar number 3. So this is actually something that a lot of people overlook, and it doesn't get enough attention, I think at least. And this is around mocking test data and being able to create atomic tests. And this is a really, really important point. And when it comes to mocking, this was also like a lot of the experts that I spoke with mentioned it as an important point. When it comes to mocking, when you think about it, like I met a lot of people here during the breaks, and there are some people that work at banks and telco companies and retail companies. And all these companies, I mean, you have very complex systems. I mean, you have a lot of external dependencies of third-party applications, different microservices. And if every time you run the test, you have to load all these environments to like a certain state, make sure that all these environments are up, you're screwed. I mean, it just doesn't, it doesn't really work consistently. You get a lot of flakiness, and that's a big problem. So it's really, really important to be able to mock these services and systems. I mean, you can ask your development team to help you with mocking. You can build, buy some service virtualization tool. There are lots of open source tools that do it as well. But this part is super, super critical. And the same is true for the test data. You need to have consistent test data. And actually here I wanted to tell you an interesting story. So a few years ago, I had a project with a large tech company. I won't mention the name of that company, but it's like a Fortune 100 software company in the US. And when I met them and we went over the goals of the project and we went over the KPIs for the team, one of the things that they mentioned, 2 things that they mentioned, which were really surprising to me, that they had 2 KPIs. One of them was around the number of new tests that they add every month, which again, to me, this was like very counterintuitive. Like, why encourage the team to create so many new tests? So that's one thing, and I'll get to it again for the reasoning and why they did it and why they changed it later. And the second KPI was around the amount of random data that they use in their tests. So they didn't want to use any tests with fixed data. They wanted all the tests to use random data because they felt that if they use random data, they get better coverage. Because every time the test runs, it runs with different data, more unexpected scenarios, etc. And again, I tried to challenge these assumptions, but again, I was polite. I was the vendor. I didn't want to be rude. But like a few years later, when I met them again, I saw that both these KPIs were actually thrown out. And I asked them, like, what's going on? Like, why did you change it? And they said, with the amount of new tests, we got to a point where at some point we went out to conferences, and we spoke and we said that we have the largest Selenium test suite in the world. We have like over 10,000 tests, and we were very proud that this was the situation. But then we realized that this is actually screwing us. I mean, this is actually causing us to move really slow. It's causing a lot of maintenance. Great, we had 10,000 tests, but we had like a 20% failure rate. So every time we ran the test, someone needs to go and look at like 2,000 tests. This was like a huge, huge issue. And again, they changed that. They focused more on like focusing on tests that are actually finding issues. And when they started going through this exercise, they found tests that were running for 3 years and never found any issues. So like 3 years, the same test is running over again, consuming time, consuming resources, never finds an issue, and it doesn't even test something that's so important. So that's one thing. And regarding the randomness, this was even more interesting because I think that it's much more important for a test to be deterministic than to have randomness in your test. I mean, if you want to test some random data, make 1 or 2 tests that test random data, but all the other tests have to have consistent data. It's much more important that the test will be stable than to have this randomness in the test. And again, the last point here is about atomic tests. So you should try your best to get to a point where the tests are atomic. There is like no dependencies, and if a test fails, you know exactly what's the area of the application that is not working. Okay, pillar number 4. We're halfway through. I think I'm the only thing between you and the coffee break, so I'll try to run fast. Pillar number 4 is also really important, reporting and analytics. And when we talk about reporting and analytics, you need to be able to easily identify flaky tests. And this part, again, there is like lots of systems, lots of tools that allow, dashboard tools that allow you to get that and find quickly which tests are flaky, and you need to be able to isolate them and fix them and then only bring them back to the cycle. You need to be able to see the results in real time. Again, we spoke about it. You can't wait for the night run to finish to understand the quality of the build. I mean, you have to be able to run the tests and in a few minutes already get some sort of picture about the quality of this build. And there are different techniques you can use to do that. I mean, there are different techniques for selection of tests and prioritization of tests based on the areas of the application that changed. And I think this is, by the way, an area, I think Adam spoke about it a little bit, but this is an area where AI can actually help a lot based on history of test results and areas where bugs were found. And again, there are companies like Purify and other companies that basically analyze your GitHub logs and basically find trends and help you correlate between tests and priorities and things of that nature. So this part is actually important to be efficient in your selection and prioritization of tests. But seeing the results in real time is probably even more important. Like you need to run the test, and after a few minutes, already have an indication about the quality of the build, because otherwise, you run the test. If you wait for the morning, I mean, by the morning, the development team maybe moved on to a different task. They already did the context switching. Now they have to go back. That's very painful and very wasteful. Pillar number 5. So pillar number 5 is about the team and the culture. And this one was also one that all the experts I spoke with agreed on and mentioned this as part of their top 6. And what I mean by the team and the culture, so first I think we spoke a little bit about skills, but the skills that you have in the team have to be aligned with the tools and with the technology that you select to use in your organization. The second point about commitment to quality, this is super, super, super important. And this is commitment to quality across the entire organization, the development team, the product managers, the test team, everyone in the team. And again, it really needs to get to a point where, like, if a test fails, everyone needs to worry about it and make sure that it gets, you understand why it failed. If it's an application issue, fix the application issue. But you can't just say, no, it's a test failed. I mean, report a defect. We'll look at it later, and it's not a big deal. I mean, for now, let's just remove this test, or let's skip this test. It needs to be treated kind of like the same way as the application code. And the same thing about testability. So testability is really important. And if you have a culture of quality, and if the engineering team and the product managers are committed to quality, people will invest the time in testability. And if people invest the time in testability, it's much, much easier, and you're much more likely to succeed with having stable automated tests. And I think, pick the right tools for the job. It's pretty obvious, but it also needs to be aligned with the skills. All right, so you can't really do a presentation these days without talking about AI, of course. So I don't know if it deserves to be a separate pillar, but I figured, it can help probably in each of the other pillars that we spoke about, but I think it's big enough now, and the potential of this is big enough. And by the way, one thing that I do want to ask you, like recently, I've been getting a lot of calls from people which are telling me, hey, Moshe, the CIO just called me, we need to implement AI. Help me. And you know, I tell them, what do you need to help implement it for? Like, what problem are you trying to solve? I said, I don't care. Right now, we have an initiative. We need to have AI. So please don't approach it this way. Like, think about problems that you can solve and then see how AI can help you. But it's actually really evolving amazingly fast. And I think I told a few people that I met here, but a few weeks ago, I was lucky enough to be at a dinner event with one of the founders of OpenAI. And we were chatting about different topics. And then one of the attendees asked him, my son is about to go to college next year. What would you recommend him to study at college? And, that's a very interesting question. I also have kids, and I think about it all the time. And it was funny. Like, he didn't have an answer ready. I mean, he was thinking about it for like 2 minutes. And he said, you know what, it's a very good question. I don't think there is one area that I can think about that if you will study that, this is, kind of like AI proof. And, it doesn't matter if he goes to be an attorney or a doctor or like a computer science. He said, what's important, just make sure to focus on his emotional intelligence, make sure he stays curious, and whatever he learns, as long as he knows to kind of like stay up to date, learn these things, have the emotional intelligence to communicate with others and lead teams and work together, he's going to be fine, and he can use AI to help him. But just don't try to think about it like this way, because again, it will replace a lot of professions as we have it today, but it doesn't mean that these professions will be eliminated. It's just going to be different job description and slightly different way of work. So after this intro, let's jump into the details. Prompt-based testing. So here, I really want to switch to the video because I have a very cool video to show you. So try to maybe skip that and save it to the end and then do the technology challenge. But then the second point about auto-grouping and maintenance of tests, that's a cool example. And then I'll show you some things that I played with ChatGPT and how it can actually get pretty far with giving you areas you can test, prioritizing tests, preparing data for tests. So we'll look at some of these cool examples. And by the way, I was also, when I was preparing the slides, I was using, now in Google Slides, they have a feature which you can do kind of like DALL-E or the other thing that I forgot how it's called, but you can actually ask it to create images for you. So I think the prompt here was, just create an image that shows, like a smart AI or something, and it created this image. So it creates some pretty cool images. So prompt-based testing, actually, let's leave it to the end. So we'll get back to that.
If you need, I can set that up to switch.
Yeah.
You want it now?
Let's do it quickly. Perfect, thanks.
Because you had it on the screen, right?
Yeah, it's on the browser.
This one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's not on this one.
Oh, it is now.
Oh, yeah, nice. Huh? You have a magic. Nice. Okay. So I'm taller, but he's smarter. Okay. So wait, let's go back for a second. Before playing, maybe let's tell you what it is. So what I'm going to show you here, this is actually a cool technology that we're working on. We call it like prompt-based testing, but think about it. This will allow you to interact with an application through like a chat interface. Kind of like very similar experience to how you use ChatGPT. But think about you'll be able to write things in natural language and give instructions to the test to work with the application. And what's cool about this is like today when you write Selenium tests or Cypress tests or whatever, you basically have dependency between the application code and the test code because you rely on locators, which are part of the application code. And when the application code changes, these locators break and you have to maintain the test. The idea here, like if you think about it this way, if you can describe the code, the test in natural language, like for example on this Wikipedia screen, tell it, hey, go click on the English link and go to the search box and type something and click search. If you can do it this way, it doesn't matter what the underlying implementation is. And even if you do replatforming or if you change the technology underlying, the test should still be able to work. So let's look at the demo quickly of how with this chat we can chat the Wikipedia page and then we can export it to a test. So I can go to this page and I can say, click on the English, like we said before. So click English, it clicks English. Let's go back. Now I want to click Japanese. I don't have Japanese keyboard, so I'll just say, click the link to the right of English. And now it clicks on Japanese, and it goes to the Japanese page. Now let's go back. And now I want to click the French. Again, I don't want to write Frances. I don't have this fancy letter, so I'll just say click the second link below the link to the right of English. And it goes to the Frances page. So that's nice. And then I want to search something, so go to the search box, type functional testing, and hit enter. And it doesn't matter, like you can type different, it doesn't need specific word. You can just type any description and it knows to understand it. And now this is interesting. I want to click the show button next to tool. Now, if you're doing selectors, it's like the nth child. This is like the worst thing, like everything that's said, it's breaking. Now you just say click on show next to tools, to the right of tools. So it clicks on show. And then you can say, OK, click hide above, above this. So as you can see, this is like really cool because you just don't care about the implementation. You just describe it the same way as you, as the user, use it. And then all these instructions, after you see that it's working once, you just export it to a test. And then you can run it seamlessly. You can parameterize it. You can do a lot of things. So it just adds amazing potential for things you'll be able to do with that. And yeah, I think we can skip the rest, but it's the same idea. But this is actually has some mind-blowing potential. And just to show you some things to kind of like spark the imagination. So let's go here. Okay, so just to do something cool, what I did here, I went to ChatGPT and asked him, give me a step-by-step instructions for ordering the Dune book in Amazon.com for Kindle using my default payment details. And I gave it some instructions to do it, one line at a time, so I have clear instruction. But then I got these 10 steps, which tells exactly what the user needs to do. And now I can just take these 10 steps and paste it to this autonomous testing platform, and it will just run these tests. So just think about the potential that this opens up. You can now take your documentation and ask, now it's ChatGPT, but basically just put it in an API inside our product. You can just tell it, hey, take the documentation, create test cases for login, create test cases for this, create test cases for that. It just creates the instructions. You can paste it, and it runs the test for you. Or you can just go to your test cases and just use that and paraphrase that. So that's super, super cool and has amazing potential. I think another use of AI, you can group test results automatically. Again, we're getting short on time, so I won't get too much into the details. But here the idea is like when you run tests across different browsers, environments, and screens, things change. And when something changes, it results in a lot of screens that are affected by it. So what I have here, I have a test that ran, and it found 76 issues. Now, instead of going and looking at 76 screens, I can actually ask the AI, analyze it for me, and group these things to similar groups of issues. So basically, the results is instead of looking at 76, I just have two groups, one with things that are legit, which is what I wanted to change, I just accept it. One with things that are wrong, I just reject it. Back to our friend ChatGPT. And I just upgraded to the paid version a few weeks ago, so now I'm using GPT-4, and I feel very proud. But actually, honestly, it's the same. I don't really see major differences. But I said here, I would like to create a set of automated tests to test the most important functionality for Coles. I said, Australia, let's test Coles supermarkets. And anyone from Coles here? OK. Suggest ways to automate these tests. So when I asked the question, actually, this is pretty nice. You have to admit, like you have these 9 things which it gives you, check the homepage and navigation, check the product search, check the product details, add to cart, responsive design, error handling, special promotion, etc. Some pretty cool use cases. And then you can go back and ask it to give you more detailed instructions for each and every step. So in this case, what I did, I told him, OK, great. I want to take the second scenario for product search, give me more details, and write Selenium code to do it. So it actually wrote some pretty nice Selenium code to do this test, and it gave me some really nice instructions. It said if you want to run it, you have to make sure you have Chrome driver, you have to make sure you have TestNG or like a different framework, and there are 2 selectors here which are probably out of date. So just go to the Coles website, make sure these are the right locators, but do that. But it's a pretty cool starting point for a test. And what's nice here, like what I'm seeing a lot of debate on social media about, can AI help or can AI not help? And like a lot of people are kind of like taking the side that it's not useful right now and it's still premature. But what's nice here, when you start having conversation with it and challenging it with more questions and ask it to give you more information, it actually gets pretty far. It's like pretty impressive. So here I said, okay, now I want the test data for this test. So give me some test data that I can use to run these tests. So it gave me, positive test data, negative test data, boundary test data, performance test data, data for variability testing. So some really cool things. And for each of these things, I can say, okay, that's great. Give me more or give me less. It's just really useful thing. All right. So let's talk about the feedback from some of the industry. And actually, I should have added OpenAI here because I also asked ChatGPT what are the 6 pillars for successful test automation. And it actually did pretty good. I think it had like 3 of the items that I had, and it had some items that other people said. So it did pretty nice. So the people I spoke with, to try to give you a broad perspective, were from Netflix, Hilton, Kenvue, which is the consumer products of Johnson & Johnson, a healthcare company, and Applitools, which is a really large company in the testing space. So let's start with Netflix. So Netflix, I spoke with a guy named Felipe. He's a senior engineer in test, really smart guy. He speaks a lot and writes a lot about testing. Netflix overall, they're pretty sophisticated with how they do testing. They're a customer of ours, of course. And what I asked him, okay, give me your 6 pillars. And good automation framework, we spoke about it. I mean, he gave slightly different details, but we won't have time to dive into that. The stability of the test and reporting, for them, this is like super critical. I mean, tests just can't fail. I mean, if a test is failing consistently, they just kick it out. Even if it's a really important test, it has to be kicked out, and it has to be fixed, and it has to run consistently before it's added. And reporting, like we mentioned, get the feedback quickly so that you don't have to wait for the test to end. You can get quick feedback about the quality of the build. Mocking and isolating certain aspects, downstream and upstream. As you can imagine, Netflix have a lot of third-party services that they depend on, so they really want to make sure that these tests are separate. And speed of execution, we spoke about it. This was common to everyone. And test selection based on what areas of the application changed. And here Felipe mentioned that they're doing some pretty cool things with AI to help them select tests based on historical logs and historical results and open defects in the system and other things. So this area has a huge potential in the future. Next one is Hilton. So Carter, he's a senior engineering manager at quality automation at Hilton. He actually has a pretty cool blog. So if you check out his name online, you will see he writes some good content. He's also a Cypress ambassador, so he writes a lot about Cypress. And his things were, don't focus on the tools as a solution, focus on how to use the tools and build the right mechanism around it. Again, he said he's seen a lot of places where they first see, oh yeah, this tool is really cool, let's bring it in, and then they think about what problem it's going to solve for them rather than find the problem first and fix it this way. The automation results should seamlessly integrate with the application development lifecycle, resulting in actionable feedback. So I think we spoke about it, but make sure that when the tests are running, everyone cares about the results of these tests and not just the test people. And until the test failure is resolved, everyone can't kind of like move on to the next task. Next one is you can't work your way out of bad architecture. You have to build a solid framework with good selector strategy. This is very true. I mean, if you start with a bad architecture, with a bad framework, it's really hard to scale. So sometimes you better to just smash it and start from scratch. And team and culture, again, everyone spoke about that. Percy from Kenvue, again, Kenvue is used to be part of Johnson & Johnson, and recently they split their consumer products, so it's almost like a retail company. Team culture, again, everyone spoke about it. Align the team skills. I mean, Percy spoke about the domain knowledge, which I didn't mention, but domain knowledge is also really important. Like a lot of people recently, I'm seeing like in job description and in other places that they say, okay, I want to hire like a software developer engineering test, has to know, Selenium or Playwright or whatever, but they don't focus on the domain knowledge. And I think, for certain industries, domain knowledge is really important, and you can't really get far just with someone that doesn't have the domain knowledge. So that's an important point. Select the right technology for the job, establish a quick feedback loop. We spoke about all of that. Stable and scalable test infrastructure. Like I mentioned, everyone spoke about that. And what they did, which is pretty unique and cool, is that they built support for accessibility, front-end performance, like the Google front-end performance thing, SEO validation, and links check as part of their standard regression suite. So they're using an open source tool called Vividus which I was not familiar with before, but it looks pretty cool. And it allows you to run as part of these tests, to do all these validations as part of your cycle. So Amplitude, again, because Amplitude is a larger company, I had to speak with 2 people from Amplitude to get their feedback. So we have Dave Vicente, you probably know him as Dave Hafner. He wrote the famous book about Selenium Guidebook, and he was also part of the Selenium project. So again, he mentioned scalable and parallel execution. I think we spoke about that a bunch. Run in the environments you care about. Tests should run atomically. I think we also spoke about this quite a bit. Have a team that is capable of writing tests and a framework that matches their skills. So again, here, this is actually something that all of them repeated, was basically they're seeing a lot of companies that just try to force their test engineer or QA engineers to transition to be automation engineer. And again, it's possible to do it, but you have to give them really solid training in software engineering. And if not, it's really hard to make that transition because you have to treat automation code as software development. It's like software development like anything else, and you have to write good quality software, and you have to develop some experience to do that properly. Quick feedback loop, and treat tests as first-class citizens. And last but not least, Anand, I think he spoke here in the previous event in Sydney. So Anand mentioned the test needs to be deterministic. You need to have real-time visibility into the test results. A quick feedback loop, shift left. And speed and scale of execution, I think we spoke about that a lot. No magic in the test framework. So again, things need to be consistent, deterministic. You can't just have these things that run one time, that don't run a different time. Maintainability and extensibility of the framework, I think we spoke about that. So I think that's it. Thanks for taking the time. I hope it was valuable. Appreciate your time.